Have you ever heard of a book named Names? Well, that's how we refer to the second book of the Torah, which most people refer to as Exodus, the book of Exodus. And Exodus is a very good title. In fact, it's even used in Jewish sources as well as a secondary name, but it's a very rational choice of a name because one of the highlights of this book is about the Exodus from Egypt, which is one of the most important historical events. But to name a book names is a little bit strange. And the simple reason is because it starts off with the words, and these are the names of the children of Israel who come to Egypt. But that doesn't really justify giving a very powerful book with so many powerful themes, give it the name Names. For example, this book has, as we just said, the story of the bondage and the Exodus. That's topic number one. Topic number two, equally important, if not more so, is the giving of the Torah at Mount Sinai, where God reveals himself to the entire Jewish people and gives them the Torah, the master plan for the universe. And the third major theme is the construction of the Mishkan, of the tabernacle in the desert, which was the first time that God allowed us to create an edifice that would house God's presence and from which God's presence would be allowed to extend to the entire world. These are three very basic and very powerful themes, and it would have made sense to refer to this book by using the words that describe these themes, either Exodus, Torah, tabernacle, sanctuary, and yet it calls it names. So the answer is very, very simple. The Midrash tells us that the Jewish people in their bondage degenerated into many Egyptian ways, including idolatry. So what was the merit? What made them eligible for the Exodus? And the answer is that they didn't change their names. What that means in simple English, and it's relevant to us today, that they didn't lose their identity. Because if you have an identity, even though you don't live in accordance with that identity, there's always a hope that that identity will encourage you to create a structure of Jewish life. It's not like a building. You have a foundation and you have a structure. Our identity is our foundation, without which the structure could not survive. But once you have the identity, you can build a structure. If we hadn't maintained our identity, then these other three themes would have proven to be non-existent. For example, the Exodus, to be free. If you don't have an identity, what happens to you? You acquire the identity of every other individual, of every other force, of every other fad. So you become a prisoner not to one master, but to many masters. So you don't gain anything by not having an identity. You're not really free. So the Exodus would be meaningless if we didn't have that identity that we preserved by virtue of our names that we never changed when we were in Egypt. The second theme, the giving of the Torah at Mount Sinai. The whole idea of giving of the Torah was for us to accept God as our king, someone that dictates to us how to live our lives. But if you don't have an identity, then there's nothing to accept. There's no acceptance because there's nobody to accept. And the third theme of having a sanctuary, God dwelling in your midst, you have to be receptive to that dwelling of God in your midst. If you have no identity, then there is no acceptance of God in your midst. God cannot find a place, a hospitable place, because you're just have no substance. So the name Names is the most suitable name because by virtue of our maintaining our identity, we were able to be freed from Egypt, receive the Torah, and create a sanctuary for God. The same thing is true in our own day and age. The first thing that we have to ensure is that Jewish people realize who they are, that they are not part of the rest of society, even though they contribute to society. They are Jews first and foremost. And when you have that foundation, then we are receptive to the energies of redemption, just like the Jews were receptive to the Exodus from Egypt in the days of old.